There are lots of issues there that relate to judicial ethics and some criminality, and so I just think that at this point he ought to resign and save the state an awful lot of time and turmoil going through the impeachment process.
From the capital city of Charleston, West Virginia, this is Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. I'm your host, Mark Curtis. We're talking about the impeachment proceedings against the West Virginia Supreme Court today. Joining us right now is attorney Harry Bell, who is also a media entrepreneur with Almost Heaven Media here in Charleston. Good to have you on the show, Harry.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
We're in week 2 of the impeachment hearings in the House Judiciary Committee. What are your first impressions?
We're in bizarre times. This is really strange to have this going on and have this investigation, so to speak, in these impeachment hearings so broad-based. I've practiced law now 38 years, and it's nothing I've ever seen or even heard about before.
We're getting into a lot of areas. Obviously, everybody knows about the big things, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in office renovations, the famous $32,000 couch and so forth. But there's been some focus on what some people think is kind of minutia, the justices, some of the justices using state vehicles for personal use or getting reimbursed for mileage that some deem excessive. Your thoughts on that?
I think to have that be the focus, if it in fact is, of impeachment hearings is overly broad, and I would think it is somewhat of a fishing expedition. You know, traditionally the way of dealing with political people who did things and didn't exercise good judgment of certain matters is at the polling place. We have elections and people vote them out. That's a real issue that people have to deal with. Now, given what's come out, and frankly there has been so much which has come out, both that being reported by the media, you all are doing a very good job, being very aggressive going in, plus other stories and rumors that we're hearing about in the legal community. There are a lot of questions out there.
Let me ask you about this, because we're only talking a couple of $1,000s. I mean, Justice Menis Ketchum said, okay, my bad, I'll write a check to the state for the money I owe. Justice Alan Lawfrey dug in his heels and said, I don't agree with these findings. Again, we're only talking about a couple of $1,000s. Could he have gotten himself out of a lot of trouble by just writing the state a check like Justice Ketchum did?
Well, the standard rule of thumb is when things start happening that are bad, and a few things are starting to come out, I would advise any client prudently get ahead of the matter, resolve those. Don't make a bigger issue of it. What frankly has come out, it's like a cascading series of events. You know, there's an expose, whether you're going to a book signing and taking a state vehicle, whether you're getting a couch, the custom-made inlay in the floor. There's some pretty bizarre things going on.
And then we had another indictment. First, a couple of weeks ago, a 22-count federal indictment against Justice Lawfrey. This week, a 23rd count added, again for obstruction of justice. How serious is that kind of charge?
I think the obstruction of justice is incredibly serious. Number one, when you're dealing with any federal investigators, if you're talking to them or any law enforcement, don't lie. You know, you have your Fifth Amendment rights. You don't have to necessarily speak to them. But if you waive those rights, you're giving an interview and you're talking to them, don't lie, because that's where you're going to get yourself into a lot of problems.
I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, because we don't know what's going to happen, but do you suspect that maybe the lawyers for Justice Lawfrey may negotiate a plea deal with the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, maybe plead to some of the lesser charges and then he resigns from the bench and this all goes away? Or do you think we're in for a long summer of impeachment hearings in the House and Senate?
There are two different tracks, and I think number one, we're looking at the federal criminal charges, and those are certainly incredibly serious, and he should be very concerned about those. I would think naturally you look at most instances you have plea agreements and criminal charges. The federal government as well as state prosecutors are very good, very effective at building cases, gathering all the evidence before they ever bring the charges. I think we saw the incredibly detailed and thorough indictment. Now with the superseding indictment with the obstruction of justice charges, they have a lot and they're prepared to go forward and prove their case, it certainly would appear. here. One would expect that good maneuvering on the defense side would be to negotiate some settlement or resolution that would involve a plea deal.
I have less than a minute. What about the public perception? A lot of people, you hear delegates saying this has eroded confidence in the state justice system. True or not true?
I think it has, sadly, and I think it started earlier this year or last year in Washington with the critique of the federal courts and federal judges. Now we see at the state level, and as a lawyer, that pains me. It's very important that people have trust and confidence in our judicial system. We have a lot of hardworking, dedicated people at all levels: judges, law clerks, staffs, prosecutors, assistant prosecutors, state, federal levels, up and down. And we have something that is the envy of the world, and that is the jury system. Right. And that's extremely important too.
Lots to talk about. We'll have you back as this proceeds this summer. Attorney Harry Bell, also the guy that runs Almost Heaven Media here in West Virginia. Thanks for being on the show, Harry.
Thanks, Mark. Really enjoyed it.
We will have more of Inside West Virginia Politics after this break, including more on the impeachment process.